Hello and welcome to Roundtable number 9 of Dualistic Unity. I am relaxed and relaxing more and more into the recognition that I don't have to be anything other than what I am for myself or anyone else.
And I am downright rubbery. I got to admit, it's kind of like a long week of practicing Kung Fu, where by the end of that week, your muscles are so done that you're doing great. You're very fluid and everything's going really well, but it's because you've got no tension left in you. There's nothing left to resist. And I feel very much that way after this week, this first week of full-time dualistic unity. Admittedly, every day being able to have this conversation for hours and hours and hours. The retreat was much more of a marathon for sure, but this week has been just amazing. I find the last 2 days I have been so relaxed in every conversation, and it's because very much like training in Kung Fu, you just kind of work all the tension out. By the time you're done, it's gone. And so I'm really looking forward to the next couple of days that we're going to have off, coming back to season 4 as of Sunday. Everybody who's listening, please do check out the new live and group discussion schedule on our website at dualisticunity.com. We are live from Sunday to Thursday every week, and we would love to engage with you and speak with you. That all said, I have one last announcement, which is, of course, that we have another retreat coming up on April 1st. Currently, the tickets are only available on Patreon, but they will be publicly available as of December 23rd on the website. So keep an eye out for that. And if you have any questions, do get in touch with us. Feel free to ask. We love to talk about it. Now that that's all done, let's get back to the roundtable, where we have 2 guests that I am very excited to have on the show. One of which, Dooz, is a moderator on our Dualistic Unity community Discord. He's been one of our longest supporters in the community and one of the most active voices on the Discord. He's often in our group discussions, and we know that he always has insight to offer and stories to share, as well as questions to ponder. So we're very excited to have him on with us. As well, Otto, who you will know from TikTok as Atomic Zero. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So if you haven't checked out his content as yet, I definitely recommend that you do. It's a rare gem on TikTok in that it comes from a place of honest curiosity and clarity to the best of his ability. He's honest in his journey, and he's more or less just trying to work it out with you as you to the best that he can. And so I'm very happy to have both of these individuals. I say individual almost tongue in cheek there, but I'm very happy to have you both on the show. We'll start with Dooz. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you came to the path? I know asking you to tell me about yourself is a little funny, but tell me why that's funny.
Yeah, no, this is great. I'm looking forward to this. I've called into a few of the lives. It's usually kind of hard for me to kind of connect just because, full-time job, kids, and so thanks for being flexible on the time, by the way. I know we had to move it up a little bit just to satisfy myself, so I appreciate that. Yeah, I guess my name's Dooz. I can go into the reason for, why the names for me are kind of a play toy in a way. And in general, really, don't necessarily mean anything. So one name is as good as another. So I go by Dooz on most social medias. And like Ray said, very active on the Dualistic Unity Discord. You've probably seen a lot of smart ass comments from me or random stories. So I just like to share my own experience, as it were. I've about 36 years on this planet, so I've got some stories to tell. I don't have any answers, but I've got stories. And so the way that I like to kind of pose myself, anyways, is not a guru, not anybody that knows anything at all. It's just I'm a guide. I'm a someone you find on the trail that tells you, hey, you're almost there. Even though I'm lying. And so just kind of having fun with it and playing with it. And so in general, yeah, like I said, I'm my background is more on the science side. I come kind of from an interesting background compared to maybe some of the others on the Discord or in the community. I kind of circumvented around the religious aspect. I didn't really grow up in a religious household, but I did adopt, science as a religion, if you can consider it that, a belief system. And so it is really what led me to question things and to start to explore all the things that we don't know, as opposed to all the things that we do know. And so a lot of, I do make a few videos here and there on TikTok. It's definitely not my forte, and not really what I want to do as a full-time, human on this planet. I'm just looking for a conversation. So the only reason I really make videos is just to find others like us that want to talk, one-to-one. And so so that's me in general. I've got, a few kids and a wife and a full-time job. And so this for me is just fun. I like to play, and, I don't think to get anything out of it other than, selfishly my own, rewards as I come across new trinkets and treasures of the cosmic and the, of the other worlds that be. So yeah, excited to talk today.
I love the intention that you mentioned there, that the reason for creating content, if you want to call it that, it's really just expressing yourself, is to see who else out there is resonating with that expression and who wants to engage on that level. That's exactly why we do this. Typically, it's just that we're putting more and more into this because there are a lot of us out there that don't know this conversation is happening in public at all. We still think that it's happening in the shadows, in the corners where people can't judge us or burn us at the stake, right? So it's really nice that that is the intention behind what you're doing, because that's what's making it work. That's what's actually engaging people. You're not coming from on high, because that has a toxic effect, and we know that. So before I go any further into that, we're going to get over to Otto. Otto, again, thank you for being here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the fiction of you, or whichever version you'd like to share with us today, and we'll see where we go from there.
Yeah, interesting. I don't even know where it begins or where it ends, but my sort of TikTok journey, I hadn't been on social media until about a year and a half ago at all. Not Facebook, not anything. I mean, I watched YouTube, but I didn't produce anything. And so I was a Franciscan in a non-denominational community for many years. I was a priest. I lived in Israel on an archaeology site. And that's where I had sort of what I can best describe as an awakening. I woke up, I got slapped with a wet noodle, and it kind of changed how I saw the world drastically. I definitely went through a deconstruction process. But interestingly, I didn't come from, like, I know a lot of people that have kind of deconstructed from a very, maybe like some toxic religion in many ways. And for me, my faith was really gentle and beautiful and open. And yet still it became a box that was just a little bit too small for how I wanted to stretch out and expand. And so I don't quite have the same angst as a lot of people that have maybe come out of some deconstruction things. And I came back to the States, kind of just was so melty that I just couldn't hang with ordinary society in many ways, but eventually kind of organized myself enough and kind of consciously chose to a little bit fall back asleep or just kind of go with the flow a little bit. And then during the beginning of COVID, I just had a little bit more. I continued a little bit of reflection, self-reflection, but it was all internal. I was very in my own inner verse. I didn't really come across too many people that was hanging or swimming in the waters I was swimming in. And then I just kind of went wide awake again during coronavirus, had a lot of really interesting experiences. And then suddenly I started to, I would dream things or have these waking visions. Innerverse was one, which led me to a podcast, which led me to Telegram, which led me to different people having interesting conversations, which eventually led me to TikTok. And I was like, what in the world is this? I had kind of resistance to, I don't know. I don't even know what, just some idea of that maybe there wasn't aliveness happening. And then it was all shallow and suddenly I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. And I got hooked. My first video, I think there's a sticker over my face. I didn't even want to acknowledge that who I was or anything. And then after a while, I'm literally pouring out everything I got just to see who it connects with. And really interesting in how the connection takes place and different people pop on and are interested in just whatever my world is, and watching the algorithm like bring the people that feel the same way. And it's like, wow, this is fascinating. you can connect really deeply with humans through this interesting thing that I don't even know what in the world it is, just by pushing a few buttons on a phone, and suddenly I'm in some amazing human being's world who has had maybe very similar or synchronistic or type experiences, and you can then connect really deeply with someone where for tens of years just didn't have those kind of deep connections. And now, I mean, that's how Dooz and I met. I came across you guys. I didn't have a lot of connection with you guys. You guys are busy in a lot of ways, but a lot of other humans that was just these amazing connections. I didn't know so many people thought so similarly in a non-dualistic or whatever you want to call it way, and it was a lot of fun to connect. So that's my story up to this point, more or less.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's funny, the stigmas that come with the ideas we hold on to about certain things, and being able to recognize that, oh, this isn't actually what I thought. And I like that you shared that initially with TikTok, you had that sticker video, covered your face up, didn't want people, finding out that you were on there. And I did the same exact thing. My first name when I joined TikTok was Randy Dufresne. It was like this alter ego kind of nickname that I had in college, and then eventually started getting some more followers, and I was like, yeah, I should probably just use my name. And then eventually it was like holding on to that as Andrew, and then it was sort of recognizing, oh, maybe this isn't what I am either. Rather than hiding the idea that I thought I was, it was then recognizing that also that idea that I thought I was maybe isn't exactly what I am either, and recognizing the inherent character that is. Then my name became not Andrew Murnane, and then there will probably be more progressions, or to how Ray's is transcending me, or Coalition for You. It's a deepening of the recognition that's reflected through the actions that we take and the characters we portray and whatnot. An initial question I have for Otto: I didn't realize that you were a priest in a past life. I'm super curious about that. And you mentioned that your faith was gentle. I think I resonate with that a lot. I wasn't ever really deeply rooted in Catholicism, though I was nominally Catholic, went to Catholic middle school and high school. My family's never super into it, so I never felt this intense shedding of it. But at the same time, when I recognized the distortion to a further and further degree, it was like, ooh, I don't quite fit this name anymore. And so I'm curious about your experience of moving past that, and how difficult potentially that was, and then your recognition of some of the deeper things, if that was more of a process, or if there was some starker experiences that you recognized that made you think like, oh, I don't fit into this anymore.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, my path was more gentle, where there definitely was, in that sort of first awakening, an ego death of sorts. All these terms get a little bit muddy, but like, it was a beautiful faith. The way that I held it, it was loose. To me, even Francis, who was kind of who we were following as Franciscans, was a human that was sort of just fell in love with the idea of God and the world, and loved nature, and loved, it wasn't like he was a Catholic, like there was nothing else to be then. He just like loved nature, and loved, and again, even God was just this kind of concept. And he lived a simple life, and he just wanted to show how beautiful being alive is. And so that's what resonated with me so much. And we kind of lived it in a way that was really beautiful. It was soft. We lived spiritual vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, not like physical vows in that way. And so it was very contemplative. And there's so many ways in which I don't think I even left or abandoned my priesthood or whatever, but I feel more like I fulfilled it, and like I'm still living it out in so many ways, in the way that, to me, it's like there's the perspective of like no one is a guru, but then there's the perspective of everyone's a guru. There's the perspective of no one's a priest, and there's a perspective that everyone's a priest. And to me, that's what even a lot of the scriptures speak of, is like there'll be a day when we're all kings and priests, as opposed to like there's not one. It's not like I am and you're not. It's like we are all of it or none of it or whatever. And a lot of it for me in my relationship with how I feel about Jesus is just like someone that recognized that he's one with the cosmos, that he's a son of God. And from the perspective of the culture that he was in, how do you express that with words? Is he going to express it the way that you and I can express it today? Of course not, because he was coming out of the culture and using the words that he was using. And so he would say things like, of course I'm a son of God. And doesn't scripture say we're not all the children of God? Like, I don't see him as saying I'm God and you're not. I don't see that in his words. I think we've added to that for various reasons and for dominance and all of this and that and the other. But I don't think that was ever his story. I mean, he even says things like, greater works will you do than these. And so I think the story of him, I think he would easily hang on this podcast and really enjoy himself talking about these things, and would have loved to have some people that could kind of hang. And that's kind of how I felt for a while after my awakening, is just not finding anyone that was kind of where I was. I came across Alan Watts, and I came across a couple philosophers and different things that weren't living, or if they were, I couldn't quite, get an audience with them or connect with them, recently after my perspective shift. And almost watching your journey, what little I have, Andrew, was like kind of jealous of you to have found Ray and kind of connected with someone in some regards. It's a different me, a different path, and I love mine, but in ways that I was jealous of Andrew or of Ray to have someone to interact with, and I remember at a certain point, I was watching you guys of like, dang, these guys are kind of right where I'd like to be in certain ways, but that aspect of me that's like, but I love that they're doing it. And now that area is covered. And now I can go over here and dance and play over here in a different area. And so that's kind of fun too. But I love what you guys do. And yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but hopefully it came close.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it all. It all resonates absolutely. And yeah, no, it's all super interesting to hear about, especially coming from that perspective is, yeah, fascinating. And I'm excited. I've been excited for this discussion, and it's just reinforcing that excitement.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to ask, because as Dooz, as you were saying, you're more on the science side of things. And I know the two of you have had conversations previous to this. How do you find it is? Because you've participated in discussions about spirituality and religion and belief and whatnot on Discord, and you've been in plenty of these conversations. How are you finding the journey to reconcile the scientific or let's say what we consider currently to be the scientific viewpoint of the universe versus some of the more metaphysical or symbolic things that we're talking about here? Not necessarily like, zombie Jesus or any of that, but the actual exploration of unity, the exploration of the ego, and how it's kind of, well, we were talking about this in the recent Nobel Peace Prize award about how awareness and the universe are tied hand in hand. That has to be just incredibly similar to the conversation of man's relationship with God. So I'm super curious about your perspective on that and how you two have managed to find some middle ground between your two perspectives.
Yeah, so I guess my relationship with science and religion, in some ways it feels like a skipping rock. Just looking back through my childhood, even though I wasn't into religion necessarily, I had a lot of friends that were. I live in the Bible Belt, and at least the northern half maybe. And so I've been to a lot of churches. I've experienced a lot of things, and heard what they're all saying, and I'm like, well, that's interesting. But I always felt like an observer, not an active participant. And so I took it all in at the time, not knowing that it would culminate into something else, as all things do. But over time, I just gravitated towards mathematics and science. And, when you're young, you think you know everything, and you have certain notions as to what science is. And there's a certain point where you get hung up on it a little bit. And scientism, people see it as a religion, like, well, this is the way it is, it's set in stone. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Science is about questioning things. It's about constantly questioning things, even the questioning of the questioning. And so what I got to find as I got deeper and deeper into it is just that as you're studying these different topics, and inside and outside of school, you find different interests. It's sort of like you're standing on a football field, and you can see the whole field in front of you and the stadium and everything. But as you get closer, narrow and narrower into a specialty, suddenly you can't see the stands anymore. You can only see in front of you. And so then, but you get a higher granularity to what you do see. And eventually it's to the point where you're seeing a single row of grass, blades of grass down the middle. And so then when you're asked the question of, well, this is what you see, how do you know what, one blade of grass over looks like? A lot of people want to say, well, it looks just like mine. Well, you can't be for certain of that. And in fact, you won't find a single scientific paper out there that claims 100% certainty of anything. 95% confidence is typically what you'll see from a statistical standpoint. And so as I started realizing these things, and, I didn't necessarily intend on kind of coming across this from a spiritual standpoint. It was always just, ask another question. There's always another secret. Ask another question. And it just got to the point where people didn't know the answer. The answer wasn't out there. And so, if you're looking out there and you're like, well, nobody has the answer. Everybody's ignoring the nuance between the two. And, the idea I've been playing with a lot lately that's kind of resonated is just this idea of paradoxes and the language of paradoxes. And a lot of people don't see that. They want either A or B. They want the right answer or the wrong answer. And there's an infinite number of divisions between those. And in fact, there's no division at all. There's a continuum. As humans, we like to quantize things and get it into these nice little packets that we can see. And so over time of this questioning, of course I delved into the religion, like, well, maybe they're onto something then, reading certain texts or, summaries of which, and like, no, that's too literal. That doesn't, from a scientific standpoint, a lot of this doesn't make sense. But if you twist it a little bit and look at it from a abstract standpoint, you start to, if reality is this giant statue in front of all of us and we're all seeing just a sliver of it, you kind of take a little step to the right and you can see it from a whole different angle. And so it wasn't really until I had my own experience, call it spiritual, call it, whatever. But, after, say, a long period of, depression and anxiety and all these things, again, over COVID, of course, that shook up everybody's lives. It just rattles your brain to the point where you start to question everything even more. And it wasn't until I had an experience myself personally that just kind of lit up all the circuits all at once. And I was like, wow, like, you can't describe this. Like, I went a year without telling anybody because I didn't have the words to put it into. But at the same time, in my mind, I realized that if I even attempted to, I was putting it in a box. And then I was going to cut myself off from what I experienced. And so that was a year before I found you guys, actually. And so it wasn't until, I stumbled across non-duality, and yeah, like Otto said, Alan Watts and the like. But then I came across one of Ray's videos, and just, again, it was like a light bulb moment. Like, wow, this guy gets it. And I did something that I don't normally do. I emailed you and I said, where can I get more of this? Like, and he's like, oh, we got a Discord. And we just started a podcast. I meant to look this up beforehand. It was maybe, I think you were 4 episodes in, maybe. And then the things that I heard in my mind during this, this otherworldly experience, that some may attribute to religion, some may attribute to supernatural. I just know what I experienced. People can invalidate it all day long, but I know what I experienced. I just saw it for what it was. Didn't try to even attempt to label it. But one of the phrases that came to me was, I am here now. Like, that was it. And to me, it was more than just, 4 words. It was an infinite number of meanings between each word and within each word. And it just spiraled out and fractaled out into all these different things. And, that was two years ago, I think. And one of the first things, I think it was you, Ray, that said in the first episode was you uttered that exact same phrase. And I was outside, I was in the process of building a house, and I was outside in the garage working on something. And I literally stopped what I was doing and just kind of sat down for like 30 minutes while the rest of the episode continued. But that phrase just kept echoing in my mind, like, what the fuck is this? Like, and that's when, so up until this point, I hadn't really paid attention to the synchronicities, as, you know, I think a lot of people call it. Didn't really pay attention to it. You know, I knew of deja vu and coincidences and things like that, but it was at that point it kind of like something clicked for me. Like, you need to pay attention to what's going on around you and you'll see something. And so ever since then, I kept an eye out for it. And I've lost count the number of times that things just line up a little bit too conveniently to be merely a coincidence. And so, yeah, going back to the Nobel Prize that you mentioned in terms of quantum entanglement and things like that, that kind of resulted in, we can talk about that more, but that resulted into a lot of different visualizations in my mind as far as what that might mean and how that relates back to maybe what I experienced or what we all are experiencing. But this idea of synchronicities was a communication tool, I guess, for me and the universe, because it was almost playful in a way. And you know, you ask questions and it answers in ways, you know, and maybe I'm looking too much into it, but I don't really care. It's fun, you know. And it's not like I'm, you know, dictating my entire life based on these things either. You know, I'm not, you know, going to buy a lottery ticket because I had a certain thing land, you know, that happened that day. It's just, just having fun with it. And it's been a blast. And then coming across more people, you know, like Otto and the whole dualistic community, you know, just, it's been really fascinating. It's almost like, you know, from a scientific or engineering standpoint, it's like a feedback loop in a way. So I could only get so far on my own. It wasn't until I was put into this network as a sort of node that would kind of interact with everything around me. Then there was this feedback loop that develops as I would say something, it would spiral out, and then people would say things back, and that would result into different thoughts that I didn't have before. And so it has nothing to do with science or religion or anything. It's just experience. And so there's this other layer in between everything, you know, that people tend to ignore, is that you don't have to be religious if you're not science, you know, if you're not into science or vice versa. It's just, it all just is. We just make these words up, and it's just play how you want to play, you know, choose your own adventure in a lot of ways. Like, just do what you want to do, and, you know, stop the judgment in a lot of ways. And so, not, you know, I know you're not judging, but like, there's a lot of things that, you know, I identify intentionally as a person of science, but at the same time, you know, that's kind of a surface level kind of observation. And so, yeah, I only by the nature of what my experience is and what I've learned so far and my method of thinking, that's, you know, kind of what's led me to be, you know, that type of person. But it's given me a different view on things that I don't think I would have had otherwise. You know, I don't know that I would have even, quote unquote, awakened had I not had that mentality, because that is what led me to what I experienced.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. This call is getting kind of trippy for me right now, especially you going back to coming across Ray for the first time, and I'm like, fuck, it's been, you know, a year and, you know, 3 months or whatever, and now we're doing this on this call, and we got, you know, Dooz on here who's been a part of our Discord for so long, and fucking talking about all this super interesting stuff. And it's funny how the more you recognize these things, the less the labels really matter. Like, you see them for what they are, whether it's science or the recognition of unity. Like, I really see those two, and people getting caught up in the belief side of science as very similar to the belief in non-duality or the belief in unity. It becomes another thing that you can latch onto as a part of your identity that adds to it, as opposed to recognizing that, you know, there may not be so many answers, there may not be so many things to settle on. And so I see science as very much just a recognition of the lack of the answers. And so that becomes more the recognition of what science actually is as a way to, you know, measure things, but never settle. And yet we've gotten to a point where we've begun to settle more and more upon these answers as because we begin to identify as, you know, a scientific person or whatever. And it's the same with the recognition of unity. It's like, you can recognize that, but it doesn't add to you, because as you cause it to add to you, or you latch onto it as an addition to the idea of yourself. It's like, how are you experiencing unity or actually recognizing the reality of it at the same time? And so with the science side of it, have there been times throughout your journey with that? I know you kind of touched on it already, where you've kind of gone up against a like scientific idea that you've held inside of you and been able to let that go, and it's sort of deepened your recognition of maybe the unity side of it and being able to see it more so as a tool. But have there been, I guess I'm just curious, like if there have been experiences where you've more or less attached to the scientific side a little bit, and as you've let that go more and more, you've actually recognized more clearly, the freedom that's available to you as you've been able to let go of that idea of being, a scientific guy as you've gone along.
Yeah. So, say what you will about Facebook, but it's a great way to test your stoicism, as you're getting into conversation with everyday people. Because there's a certain level of, ignorance in the truest sense of the word, ignoring the, everything else around an issue, ignoring the nuance of a thing. But I would kind of delve into these conversations and debates just based on the knowledge that I had. I eventually realized that I can have these discussions without really knowing all of the facts. Be completely honest, I was a shy kid up to about 30 years old. I thought I had to have all the facts before I said anything. But it got to the point where I was like, well, I have all the facts that I have up until this point, and so that's got to be good enough. And then there's this negative connotation with backtracking if you say something that's wrong, and there's all this anxiety related to that. And so it got to the point though where I was having these conversations online and in person and otherwise. And, it was largely around I don't want to go into details here. It gets messy, but the whole COVID thing and the whole the state of the world and everything else. And it just gets to this point where not even like science in the pure sense, like the science of, virology or anything like that, but just the questioning aspect of science and just the literary review of what's out there and things like that. Like, well, all these people know what they're talking about because they're experts and things like that. And largely that's true. But it got to the point where I started questioning my own self and my confidence level with these different things. And that's when I started kind of ebbing into this area of nuance. Like, well, these people are saying this, these people are saying this, these people are saying this. And what ultimately they could all be true, And so they're all coming at it from different angles. And it wasn't really until I connected that with the type of, I guess, scientific background that I have and the studies that I've done. It wasn't until then that I realized, well, they're all just seeing a single blade of grass, And so I had to put that up against, the kind of conflicting ways that they sometimes will interact with each other. And the way that also is viewed by the public based on, what all information is out there and how it's interpreted and all these things. And so it was kind of this tumultuous, churning in my brain of, I got to the point where I just stopped altogether. Like, it's not even worth talking anymore because, I don't even know what I'm talking about. And so that's where I started to kind of dive in deeper inwardly and, question, what do I actually know? And turns out very little. I know very little. I can see things, what's in front of me. I can question things and I can get feedback, but it gives you, a tiny little hair sliver of truth and reality. And I love about scientific method is that, it's this constant state of questioning and validating and all these things, and that's great. But at the same time, there's areas within that you find are unknown and are often, let's say, written off as outliers or, not included in the data set, let's say. And it got to be kind of looking deeper into things like that, where you're on the fringes and you're kind of questioning everything that you think you know. And then so not just within the scientific community, but outside of that, and just questioning even, your own body, your own self. And so all those things kind of collided into this, again, I just kind of stopped talking for a while because it was just too much. It's just, trying to fit everything all into, one little corridor, and it just gets stuck. And so it wasn't until I kind of like slowed down, like, let's look at this one at a time and just kind of come out of it from that way. And I think ultimately where it helped me in the end is that, I started seeing things in a way and developing my own kind of ways of thinking in the end of that. Before then I would say I was more so just, oh, I need to look at all the literature. I need to read everything that is known about this subject, just to reply to this one random internet stranger. And so I would spend 2 hours researching something, give a reply, and they would say something back like, "Nuh-uh." It's like, what a waste of time. And it's like, it wasn't. For me, I find it interesting. I find it fascinating, all the things that I learned from that. But at the same time, I start digging in. It's like, well, why are they saying that? It's like, what don't they understand? And so I started questioning outside of myself, like, what perspective are they seeing that I'm not seeing? And so it was that kind of outside looking in type of, shift in perspective that helped me kind of look at things from this paradoxical standpoint of, being right and wrong at the same time and things like that. And so that's anymore, like, I've kind of evolved my own way of thinking to question things and develop my own theories on things that I know are probably not true, but they're at least kind of a loose framework of when a new idea is kind of lobbed at me, like, oh, well, that kind of fits over here and, evolves into this area. And that's where I love the conversations, because it when I find something that I know absolutely nothing about, I latch onto it. Like, I need to know more about this, because that's a blind spot. Like, we don't know what we don't know. And so it was kind of this evolution from needing to know the truth to being okay with the unknown and being okay with the chaos and living in the chaos and being okay with that. And that translates to so many other things within your life. It's not just knowing of the facts that are on the internet or in books or in people's minds. It's just being okay not knowing what's going to happen tomorrow. And so it kind of transcended just the knowing of things and into the actual being and living of things, if that makes any sense at all.
Absolutely. It absolutely makes sense. And I think, and I'm going to try and piece this together, so I ask that you bear with me as I do so. You were saying that you're exploring a paradoxical way of looking at the universe or existence or yourself or any of that. And I always kind of joke that, it's always both and neither. Always, regardless of what it is, it's always both and neither. And that can be very frustrating. But the reason I say that is because it lends more to the journey itself. You can look at both perspectives and get a bigger field of vision at the whole thing. And what I thought was really interesting, and I'm going to try and tie the two of you together here, or rather the two narratives that you've been sharing with us together here. What's interesting is that we were talking about the feedback loop, right? That you're out there and all of a sudden the community is like, yeah, and here's some more questions and stuff I'm going through. And you're like, oh, wow, yeah, no, okay. And you were saying that I don't think I could get here if not for them. And I think that's absolutely true, except it's the perspective of me versus them. You were saying, like, kind of on my own, but we're never on our own. The individual is the perspective. Right. And so as we let go of that, as we become more vulnerable and more authentic, all of a sudden now we're opening ourselves up to more of our intelligence being at play, because it's being shared with the rest of us. So it's like synapses finally connecting. Right. And so you look at that, and then you look at the Jesus story, as Otto was saying, right, that was really just a guy who's like, yeah, look at all this. But I don't think it was just the guy. It was the crowd around the guy all agreeing. It was a bubble of awareness coming to the surface in our collective. And I think that that's what this is. I think that's what we're a part of here, is a part of another bubble of awareness coming to the surface. And this is why, Otto, I liked what you said, that, despite leaving the priesthood, you actually went further into it. And yeah, everybody's a priest and everybody's not. And I get all that. But the fact is, when you're talking about a mentality, you're talking about the work, the grace, the humility, the surrender, all of that stuff. You're talking about aligning with the flow. And it's not a type of priesthood that anybody can bestow on you. Right. So I find it so very interesting that here we are, about as far from religion as possible, living what religion is trying to communicate, or has been trying to communicate, and kind of lost that it was doing so. I've joked that I feel like my life is something straight out of the Bible. And it feels that way. And so I just think it's really interesting that we're talking about all of our individual journeys, but it's pretty obvious that it's not an individual journey. Like, it's pretty obvious all of these things are tying together. And I just wanted to say very quickly, I really appreciate how much both of you, and Andrew, of course, but you don't get any credit because you do this all the time. How much you've taken to this with enthusiasm, with clarity of mind, with a willingness to look at it. And I know my appreciation doesn't mean much, but as a part of you, let me just say, kudos, for sure. Well done. On another note, I wanted to say, Dooz, I was thinking that often when I think of science, I hear it's a search for truth. I think it might benefit us to say it's more of a long, hard look at how much the truth is. If we'd stop trying to settle on an endpoint, perhaps we'd end up having more of an appreciation for the fact that this is a journey. And I think that we're just starting to understand a lot of the key parts of that journey. I think that's where we're getting to. And I think it's a result of this bubble of awareness. I think there are certain insights in science and spirituality, both, that we cannot have with the perspective of individuality. I think we actually have to come together for those insights to manifest. Curious about your thoughts, both.
So one thought popped into my head as you said that, like, what if you look back at, the great thinkers of, back then, Einstein didn't come up with a lot of his theories pen to paper. It was a lot of, thinking about things and, meditating on it. And these thought experiments, like, oh, what if I was writing on a beam of light? Like, who thinks of that? Like, but it was his way of visualizing it and playing with it and having fun with reality. And then, like, everything else kind of like settled into place. But it's this play aspect that I think is really interesting. And that's where, to tie it back to Otto, like, we kind of gelled almost immediately, even though we come from different backgrounds. And it's, I'll be talking about something sciencey or whatever. And he's like, oh, you mean like, I'm talking about toroids, at one point. And I'm like, and he's like, oh, like a giant cosmic toilet. And then I had to think about that. I was like, well, is it? And, instead of just immediately like dismissing, I was like, I wonder how that could be, like a cosmic toilet. And then I was like, yeah, it could be. And then so I went on this big rant on what that could mean. And it's just because you can't take it too seriously. It's all just play.
Yeah. And for me, I think that's the thing is I am naturally very playful and curious, and just like, let's tear this thing apart and see how it works. And so, and then at some point I came across a TikTok. I don't know that it's true, but I like the idea that, like, your brain can learn like 20 times faster if you're in a state of play than if you're in a state of kind of defensive protectiveness. And it makes sense, whether or not the numbers are accurate. The idea that your mind is like open and you're not even necessarily consciously trying to learn. You're just engaged with your environment. You're excited. You're enamored with what's going on. You're naturally going to pick up a lot more nuance and little things than if you're like, oh, what's coming at me? What's going to get me? And there's all kinds of parables and koans that describe that. And I like, even, the word individual comes up, and every time someone said it, I keep thinking of, I think probably something I shared with Brad is like, I don't feel like an individual. I feel like an indivisible. I feel like we're so interconnected. And even to the point that, like, I mean, when we think about relationships, we think about the relationships, a wife, a child, a friend. Like, I mean, I have a relationship with people across the world that I don't know. It's a different kind of relationship. It's not a direct relationship that my mind could like cognate what is happening, but there is a relationship. There is an effect. I mean, the phone that I'm talking into was handled and made by people on the other side of the world, was designed by people all over the world. Like, there's relationship happening. There's connection. There's things that you guys have said in a podcast that someone said to someone, that someone said to Dooz, that Dooz said to me. And there's an effect there. A long time I had this concept of like, well, I have no effect on the world. And it's like, yeah, maybe I have more of an effect now that I have 1,200 followers on TikTok. But even before that, like, I have a conversation with someone, and they have a conversation with someone, and they have a conversation with someone. And it's not even that they remember that I was even a part of the conversation, even after phase one. But suddenly your ideas, like a network of the aspen trees that are all interconnected, there is an effect. So to try to like, to feel the separation psychosis, or whatever, if you want to call it, so intensely that you have no effect on the world is just about as unscientific as anything else. You know, we have an effect, and the more alive and engaged with the world you are, and excited to be alive, excited to connect, the more powerful and alive that connection will be. And even what we consider a connection or a non-connection is still a connection. Even silence is a form of communication. It is a form of connection. It is a form of a relationship. So we're not individuals, we're indivisibles, and we're individuals, like they're perspectives of consciousness and all of that good stuff.
Both and neither.
Yeah. And that's what I love about, I was glad Dooz brought up the language of paradox, because, you know, we've been having some conversations back and forth, and to me, I don't even think of a thing as being or not being anymore. Like, everything is ultimately a paradox. My mind just doesn't put things in fixed boxes here and here. It's just kind of like all these open containers of stuff just kind of flowing in and out. I hold it so much more loosely. And whatever I think I am, I'm definitively also the opposite. I'm definitively also, in some regard, the absolute opposite, and everywhere in between, and even beyond those concepts on either side of the spectrum that's just outside of my purview of how to measure. That's endless. Infinities and infinities and infinities.
Oh man. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I love the that topic of relationships too, because I haven't really thought about it in that way, I guess. And it's more clearly seen the more you let go of your idea of yourself, because that's really what it comes down to, is cutting you off from all of the interactions that you have with everyone, your ability to see yourself in everyone, and talking about, you know, the sound and the silence and the paradox of everything. Like, you know, the sound can't exist without the silence. So it's intrinsically interconnected. And with the relationships, even, I see more clearly that, like, on the surface, it doesn't matter so much, as opposed, like, compared to our mentality that we're experiencing. And like, on the surface, Ray and I, about as different as it gets. Like, we're very, very far apart, but our mentality is what connects us. You know, like, I'm single, 16 years younger, was in New York for a very long time, like the most egotistical place probably in the world, whereas Ray lives on more of a remote island with a family and everything. But it's our mentality that connects us, and our willingness to question everything we think we know, or that we believe to be the truth, and recognizing that it never is, and yet it's okay. And we can play with that, and we can have fun with it, and we can go about everything in this sort of playful manner. And I think that's what it all comes full circle to, is letting go of our belief that everything is so serious. Like, I really think that is what a lot of this comes down to. And it's cool to see. That's what I love about both of your content, is that there is always a playfulness to the videos and a lack of seriousness. And I've learned a lot from both of you, because I think a lot of times people, when they start to, and I've gone in and out of having, you know, a more egotistical idea of myself, and I've been able to let go more and more of that. But, you know, with being looked at in a certain way, sometimes you subconsciously attach to that, and then you get caught up in your own sort of prison. And I would get caught up in, like, this endless need to, like, grow my account, because, like, growth is best and things like that. And then being able to recognize that, like, oh, I don't have to push every video to try and make it, you know, as fucking viral as possible. Because, like, at what cost? At what cost does that come? It comes at my experience and my ability to enjoy the experience. Like, it's always for that external purpose, and that's never what it's about. And as long as you hold on to that desire for a thing to be something for something else, like, you're missing the whole thing. And I think that's what it comes down to with the enthusiasm, and the ability to play and learn through that, is all it comes down to, is doing it for the thing. You know, play is not for any motivation outside of the thing that you're doing, and being completely and totally enthralled in the enthusiasm that goes with that. And more I've been, just in my own life, recognizing that, and the importance, and, like, that's all it ever comes back to. We can go through everything in our lives and try and get to all of these places. But if you're not doing it for the sake of doing it, what's it worth? What's the point? And then at the same time, get caught up in all that stuff too. Like again, both and neither. Like the paradox of it is like, yeah, you can go stride and recognize some things through that and then come back but it's all about that balance. It's not fully one thing or fully the other. And being able to fluctuate between them without resistance has been very helpful, because it's that resistance that cuts you off from all of it, is thinking that one is better than the other, or one should be done and one shouldn't be done. Where are you at? What are you focused on? What are you getting enthusiastic about? If it's about, growing a business or working on something or improving yourself, like go all in on it, and then experience some consequences and come back to not trying to become something and just being where you're at. And it's always that balance. It's always that flow. It's always that recognition that there isn't anything you have to settle on. It's not one or the other. It's both at all times, and follow where it takes you, and let go of your need to get anywhere or think that one is better than the other.
Yeah. And it's interesting, Andrew. I loved seeing your content pop up. I don't look as much as I used to on TikTok, but you were popping up a lot. And I don't know if there's any recognition or recall. I mean, I can't even fathom the number of followers and comments you have, but like at some point there was like a video, and you were making a lot of videos walking through New York, and maybe this was in your viral stage or something. And I remember watching your video and I made some comment. I was kind of just like poking you a little bit. I didn't know if you even see it, but I was something like, I don't quite believe you. It was something like this. And I don't know if you saw it or not, or if it pinged you in any way, shape, or form. But what was interesting was then, like, it wasn't too much longer. It was like maybe several days went by, and you made this video, and you were like, you know what? Like you had this kind of recognition. And like I said, I'm not saying it's connected, but it was like, I want to do stuff for myself, and I want to, and it was really cool. It was like, oh yeah, maybe I picked up on a little bit of that energy somehow. And it was interesting. But I've loved your journey into like being more expressive of, and like a little bit of, forget the game, like the gamification of more followers, or trying to speak to what I think will get volume, but what's the cost of volume over like the quality of connection is like who cares? I'd rather have honestly my 1,200 followers, and they're like, or not even followers, but friends and connections, than like a billion people that are just clicking just to click or something, and just because it maybe speaks to their ego or whatever, rather to have that fidelity of connection. And it was kind of neat, just like, oh yeah, there was some little recognition, and then you seem to have the same recognition or whatever. I don't know. It was interesting anyway.
I wanted to actually comment on that earlier, because we were talking about the algorithm and how people just tend to get brought to you. And I always wonder to myself, how many of those people are the result of a ripple I sent out earlier in my life? All of a sudden their interests just happen to align that much farther later, right? In which case, what exactly are we referring to when we talk about the algorithm? Are we talking about TikTok at all? Because there's a lot more to it there, right? Like all of a sudden it seems like TikTok might be the inner cog on that machine, with a whole lot of other parts making it work. But back to what you were saying about followers, I get excited when I lose followers. I actually made a video about this at one point, and it's because I know there was a whole bunch of people that were misinterpreting me, and now they're not. And so typically that's something I'm really happy about, because of the people who stayed, because of the people who continue to question me, the people who continue to disagree with me, or at least just stick it out to have the conversation. There are numerous people on our Discord that joined after arguing with me, sometimes for several days. Right? I love that. It's just being willing to do that. But as Dooz was saying on Facebook, and I think possibly the platform might have something to do with it too, it really is finding the audience that wants to have that conversation, right? Facebook, it's difficult. You can go to a certain page, but even then, a lot of people are just looking for that coat to wear. I'm a non-duality person, I'm into Zen, and it's like, oh, for God's sakes, right? But, or for my sake. The point being is that there's so much more to it, but we're looking for people who are looking for the uncertainty, who want to question things and rip them apart. And so all we can do is be there doing it, right? Watch the other people flee. And I like to think fleeing people are an indicator to people like us. If we see people running away from something, we naturally assume that should be good. And so we go towards it. So I think we're doing a positive there just by shining a light onto ourselves, as Krishnamurti said. It's just being indivisible. Also, as Krishnamurti said, I don't know if you know that, Otto, that Krishnamurti actually said, individual, the etymology is indivisible. And yet we're totally fragmented, right? If you get a chance, Krishnamurti, absolutely. He's brilliant. And it's because of the very same thing. He wasn't settling on a concept. He never wanted to. It was just, we're weighing things together. I'm not teaching you anything. I don't want to be up here because that doesn't help any of us at all. But his whole thing was, there's no conflict without I.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And I think for me, one of the things that I just kind of played with around today is this concept of being willing to destroy concepts. Like that, in a way, my first awakening, like the idea was like, here, lay yourself on this table and let's chop you up. And it was like, there's a natural resistance to that in many ways, tradition in general. It's like, no, we gotta put it on a pedestal. In a way, for me, even much of the way that I look at now, Christian scripture or any scripture is like when and how to destroy the idols that we've made out of good ideas. And it's a good idea to have a good image of yourself, but it's also a good idea at a certain point to take it apart and rip it apart. And so this concept of this conversation I had with someone on TikTok that just befriended today, and it was I was describing this concept of being willing to do this, and she was like define it tighter, tighten it, come down with a word. And so I came up with the word, I didn't come up with it, but there's the word iconoclast, which is, to tear, to take apart the imagery or whatever. Especially, I think that typically the term is like, you're pushing against maybe the religion that has, held you down or something like this, and the imagery of it. But I kind of thought of it in terms of, to add the play to the word, to create a new word, was like iconogasm, of like almost like loving the imagery. So it's not like you're hating it and you're despising and you're tearing it apart. It's like you love it enough to like let it go, to love it into bliss, and like honor it, like the beauty of Andrew, the beauty of Dooz, the beauty of Ray, the beauty of Otto, like that, instead of just like this like angsty, angry, you bastards kind of a negative idea of these icons, like just like, oh, that's so beautiful the way that we've put you on a pedestal, but now we're going to play with you and throw you across the room and catch you and be more silly with you, instead of this like clinging, angsty feeling towards beautiful ideas. I mean, I love Jesus as much as the next person, but like we put him we keep him on this pedestal in a way that like we're not even listening to him say like, greater works will you do than these, and all of this kind of stuff, where it's like he's like, come out and play, and we're like, no, keep them locked in the cupboard, and nobody recognized that they can do anything like this. It's like, come on, let's play, let's dance, let's heal each other, let's love each other, let's look at ourselves through self-examination, let's dance. What the hell else are we doing here?
Yeah, but we don't want to get Jesus dirty. We got to keep Jesus clean, make sure that, we can stick him up here and show him to people. Look at Jesus.
He's perfect.
Practically new. Exactly. Unopened, still in the package, that kind of thing. But that's just it. So coming down from religion and all that, but still very much in the vein of the algorithm, basically us being the algorithm. Dooz, this question is specifically for you, though. Actually, Otto, first question. Do you have children yourself?
I do. I have 2 children.
Wow. Okay. So this is for both of you then, because I'm also a father, and I know, Andrew, that's not something that you have come to as yet, but it's not overly different than interacting with humanity, except that it's a human that came from you, and then they know all your buttons, and they're watching every single thing you do. Not what you're telling them, but why you're telling them and where that's all coming from. So there's a lot to learn from your children. For me, I woke up prior to having my daughter by a good margin. I think it was probably about 6 years. And so by the time my daughter was born, I was just enthralled. I'm like, oh, here I come. Here I come. And I'm watching all the little things that I'm learning again. And from that, remembering all of the things that I've already learned and taken for granted. I remember watching her like learn to use her fingers going, oh, I don't even remember doing that. Right. Like stuff like that. Or like how long has the journey been? That all in mind. I'm going to start with you, Dooz, because I know you were talking about a recent moment that you had with your child where they just expressed, I do it because I love it, right? I do it because this is the feeling that I love. And there's no other bigger reason. That's it. And so as a parent, do you find that your appreciation, not for having a child, but for yourself as a child and your child, do you recognize, do you find that you're kind of going back and forth between the idea of a father and all the responsibilities that go with that, and just another human that's been here longer? Like, how do you find that influences your relationship with your child?
Yeah, parenthood is one of those things that I think we've talked about this in the past, but you'll come across people in the spiritual community that say you can't have a spiritual awakening if you've got kids. It's too messy, You've already been invested, you've got all this stuff, and I can confidently say that is completely false, because I had 3 kids by the time that I ever started questioning any of this stuff. Of course, I had questioned a lot of things before that, but just going about life, just living kind of on autopilot for a little while. What I came to find, though, that was really interesting is once I kind of cracked myself open and started questioning, whatever I am, it became a lot easier to talk to my children and relate to them and empathize with the things that they're going through. And, you kind of forget after a while how difficult being a child is and the emotions that come about as a child. And emotions are one of those things that I could talk about for hours. But, I think Otto and I just talked about this the other day, like when you say happy, there's no such thing as happy. There is a contextual feeling in your body that is based on all of the inputs you have at that time, every experience you've had up to that point, the contrast based on when you were last sad. There's all kinds of different things. And it's like this word happy kind of pops into your head. But what I've realized as I've explored all these things and just watched my kids, get upset and get happy about the silliest things, it's like I look back at my own life and like, wow, how did I feel in a similar situation? That feeling would come back. Like, man, like if it was, a traumatic situation or whatever, it's like, man, that really sucked, like being rejected by friends or whatever it might be. And so as I'm talking to my children, I'll ask them then, like, how does that make you feel? And like, what does that mean to you? And like, ask all these kind of more probing questions, just not only to get to know them better and kind of where their head's at, because 2 of them are girls, 1 of them is a boy. And so, their minds are a little bit different and different ages and things. And so what I found is that it's been, not only getting to know them, I've in a way been able to heal my own inner child based on this feedback loop. So you get to know like how their brain works, and it's like, wow, that's why this fucked me up so bad. And it's like you kind of realize like all these things that happened to you back then, like something as simple like as a grown-up, one thing that we can do, as kids are complaining about things like, oh, Susie's mad at me because she said this, and then your daughter starts crying. It's like it's easy to say, oh, get over it. But it's like if you sit with them, if you really understand like what was said, why did they say that? What did you feel in your body like when that happened? Like you can go back, you can identify things that you didn't even remember up until that point. Like, wow, I remember back in kindergarten, this kid Kevin pushed me down on the playground, like, and like all of a sudden this thing sparks in your mind. Like, wow, like I don't know what to tell you. Like as a parent, like I don't know the solution to this. Some kids are assholes, but like there's this honesty that kind of comes about, and oftentimes we try to just ignore things and just sweep it under the rug, more so for our sake than it is for the kids' sake, versus actually sitting with it and facing it head on it helps, both parties. And just kind of it's been interesting kind of watching and just kind of being on certain sides of TikTok with, parents that are, kind of really sitting down with their kids in this way and getting to know them on that kind of level and developing this relationship that, they never had and maybe they always wanted. And you start to look back at the way, that you were raised, which could be a perfectly, valid way to be raised. I have no complaints at all for myself, but, had I had this type of person in this particular moment, like it would have made that a little easier, and it would have maybe led to certain insights that, like the butterfly effect, who knows what it could have cascaded into, could have changed my entire life. And so as a parent, you start, and just to be completely honest, I think people get this false mentality that, once you, become enlightened, I don't even like that word. I hate that word. You never lose your shit, which is completely false. Like, you still have emotions. If you stuff your emotions down, you're doing it in a way that is, it hinders your ability to feel other emotions. You can't just stuff down anger and things, it takes everything else with it. And so you have to allow yourself to kind of get absorbed into these moments, like lose your shit a little bit. Like, it's fine. Like, but have that conversation afterwards. Like, look, I'm sorry, and be genuine with it. And, recognize that you're still a human on this planet that feels emotions, because that's our evolutionary, bias that has been dictated from, millions of years before. Not to say that's not your fault, but like it's okay to feel things. And as having kids, it's I don't know that and again, there's a great number of things that I don't know I would have ended up in the same spot that I am without. And having kids was one of them, because it pushes you in certain ways and pushes your buttons, and it, makes you uncomfortable, and it forces you to really kind of reconsider things. And, you never think you're going to be the person that says, because I said so, but it's going to happen. Like, and there's a reason for that. And you have to be okay with that. Like, it's could go on for quite a while on it, but parenthood for me is it's fun. It's play. It's an excuse to play with Legos again. It's an excuse to, be silly and crack dad jokes. And, I think I don't know that I would be doing these things. I wouldn't be as comfortable if I didn't have kids, And so for me, I have to be not necessarily careful. I choose to identify as a father, and then once the kids move on and they move out, I don't know what's going to happen. Obviously I'm still a father, grandfather at some point, but I don't know what's going to happen. And I'm okay with that now. I didn't always used to.
Well, that's it. And that makes the difference. I mean, we grew up with a certain degree of not trauma, but we grew up with the habits of our parents or the people who raised us. We grew up looking at them as the template for humanity. And so that's where a lot of our initial structure came from. And now we're changing that structure as our children are exposed to us. So who's to say what the next iteration is going to be, or what the next world they're going to create is, and so on and so forth. And I mean, that's it. That's again, the algorithm in motion. That's the change happening. It's just that we don't get to see where that's going. And I guess that's kind of the fun. That all said, Otto, how about your thoughts? I don't know how old your children are, or if they still live with you, or what your situation is, but I'm very curious to hear about your journey.
Yeah, so I have now a 6 and a 10-year-old, and my firstborn was born in Israel. It's actually funny. My wife and I, we were on the archaeology site at the time, and I had this kind of awakening, whatever you want to call it, and my wife did too. Hers was different in a way, but we'd been using birth control, and interestingly enough, the brand of the condom in Israel that we were using was called Control. And we literally at one point we decided to open up the door and throw Control out the window and let's see what happened. It wasn't like we were trying to have children. It was like, let's just stop trying to control what happens. It was really funny. And then must have been right away that something was in control, because very quickly there was a little one on the way, and we just didn't even have a clue what we were doing. And this beautiful being is suddenly there, and I was in utter ecstasy, and my wife wasn't as much. Having this child and being in this country, and it was a beautiful story for her, but it was very hard, and she really didn't know what she was doing, and I didn't either. But I was okay not knowing what I was doing, and she was a little less comfortable with it in many ways. But it was gorgeous. It wasn't soon after that we came back to the States, and eventually my second daughter came along, and that one was more beautiful. I actually, that one we had in a birth center, and I caught her coming out of the womb in a big bathtub. It was this really cool experience, and they have been for me definitely little gurus, always pointing out to me where I'm full of shit, and they just have an innate ability to know that without even looking at you. They know when you're full of it, and I just love that. And there's moments where you're like, oh, but then it's like, oh, you got me, dang it, all right, let me go back to the drawing board here and let me come with some more genuineness. And I love it. Even my connection with my second daughter, who's very, very outgoing and playful, like, she just really wanted to wrestle and to play. And I'd been kind of resistant because I had this idea of like, well, I wasn't even aware I had the idea that you're not supposed to be really kind of physical engaging. And finally I was like, all right, let's go. And after I really played kind of rough and let her really get into me after this one point, I was like, oh, well, geez, maybe that was too rough. Maybe like someone driving by is going to call the authorities on me or something like this, And I thought, and maybe I went too far. Maybe I scarred her, this idea, like maybe I scarred her, because I was so demonstrative and all this. And she went off and she felt so comfortable. She was playing on her own. And then when she came back, she just snuggled into me like she hadn't in such a long time. And it was this really cool experience of like, just kind of just letting go, just relaxing and allowing the play to come as it wants to come. And from then on, we've made wrestle night a regular part of our experience together often, both my girls, and just a lot of different ways in which, you don't even know you have hangups until something catches your shirt enough to finally like pull that off. And we've just had a lot more fun the more I've kind of released. And same thing with Legos, digging out my old Legos. I had a Blacktron, I think is what they were called, set, like the full big base, and we built that together. And just watching them create and being creative with them, it's doing art together. I mean, so much like inner child healing and all of this. And yeah, they're definitely masters in their own right in many ways.
Well said. That's amazing. I'm glad that we all share this sentiment of understanding that we kind of knew more when we started, but we had to forget it in order to learn more about how lost we could get. I think that's the point. Like, my daughter's 15 now, she's going into 16, and she's at a point where I kind of step back as the drama comes, as the friends are doing their thing and trying to self-validate and trying to pull her into it. And I let that happen. And then she comes to me in her own time. She's like, okay, I'm kind of noticing this, and can I get your perspective? And I'd like to think about it. And because she has that safe space, that's it. But if I was to go in there and be like, oh, don't listen to that. Oh, what's happening today? Right? Like there'd be no room for her to grow, right? It would be growing under my guidance and my careful instruction, which is not growing at all. Right. And so it's such a very tricky balance. But admittedly, the best teacher I've had in my life has been my daughter, just because there's so much that you just have to accept you don't know. And it's those moments of parenting where you're like, why can't you just see what I'm trying to, oh, right. Oh. And then all of a sudden you just deflate and the bridge is established suddenly where your kid's like, finally, we can talk now. And it's the funniest moment, but it's like that with everybody. It's like that with everybody. And that's the thing that really taught me in life coaching and everything else, was that just let go. Stop trying to get somewhere with these people. Stop trying to get them somewhere. Just be with them and let them take you where they're going. And there's so much more that goes with that. And so I'm going to pass this over to Andrew, because I know I just ranted for a little bit, but I just wanted to say, as a parent, thank you both for sharing your experience with me, because it's been instructive.
Yeah, not gonna lie, feeling a little left out here, guys. But at the same time, grateful that I don't have kids because, don't have that stable relationship with another person. So hopefully there's none of them running around there. But all jokes aside, I find it interesting because you're talking about the joy that comes from having kids, being with kids, and sort of letting go of that role, of those assumptions that you have about, what they're going to resonate with. And before, we were talking about happiness and the word happiness, and how, happiness is just a concept. It's just a word. Like, happiness doesn't actually exist. It's just a word. It's just a combination of feelings. And I feel like it's sort of what arises as we let go more and more of ourself, of our assumptions, of the way that we think things should go. And hearing all of your stories talking about, a constant letting go of the way you think your kids are going to resonate with things, or the best way to be a parent. It's like I'm seeing in your stories, like, more and more happiness arising, and allowing it to be based on your ability to let go of your assumptions. Wrestle night, you have an assumption about that, not being a thing that you should be doing for whatever reason, based on societal expectations or what people will think, whatever. As you let go of those assumptions, it's a really fun time, and like it allows you to connect and whatnot. And so I just find that parallel to be super interesting and really cool. And, just from my perspective, I see a lot of similarities being a child of parents, and I have a pretty strong relationship with my parents. Like, we've always gotten along pretty well. And, I don't have kids, so this is sort of the closest type of relationship that I could think of. And I think as I've been able to let go more and more of the role of, being a child and their role being a parent, I've been able to see where they're coming from in a lot of different ways, and seeing that, we're both just reality trying to figure things out. And they hold on to some assumptions and some roles at times, thinking like every parent does to a degree, and being able to see that, they're just doing their best. And I think that's something that maybe not all kids ever recognize, but eventually most kids begin to recognize, like, oh, my parents, I always thought of them as parents, as these people way up here, but they're just people who have been around for a little bit longer than I have. They're just grown-up kids. And being able to let go of those labels and all of those ideas and assumptions that come with those labels allow for more clear and, I don't know, cognitive communication between the two. It's no longer through this veil of, the role that we're playing. And so letting go of those roles more and more, and especially it just comes naturally as you get older. I'm 27 now, so it's like, it's a lot different than when you're 12 years old or 5 years old. The relationship naturally sort of transitions and changes over time. But I think it's the case with all relationships. And we were talking yesterday on a live chat. Someone was raying someone on it. We're going back and forth a little bit about the recognition of belief and whether or not that's a necessity for reality and for living. And so I think as we let go more and more of, I think of belief as, a role in a way. It's like an assumption we make that veils us or cuts us off, or it's another layer between us and the rawness of reality that allows us to see ourselves in everyone and empathize with other people and have genuine connection, as opposed to just the superficial connection that comes with, playing the part in the proper way, believing that you are a certain role, believing that there's a right way to play that role or a wrong way to play that role, cuts us off from the ability to actually connect and actually have that genuine experience. And so, whether it's a child with the parent, or a parent with the child, or a friend and a friend, or whatever it may be, me and my dog that's lying over there sleeping right now, like letting go of the assumption, dog's different. Animals are a little different because, she relies on me to feed her. And if I didn't do that, but I guess that's kind of like a child in a way too. But what I'm saying is, I think as we let go more and more of the roles in whatever situation that we're in, and thinking that there's a right way to do it, as if that could possibly exist in reality, like, oh, reality has decided there's a right way to be a parent and a wrong way to be a parent. Like, letting go of that assumption that it even exists allows us to experience that genuine connection, which is all we're ever trying to get to, but we're trying to get to it through doing it the right way, as opposed to recognizing that, it's letting go of the role in itself allows for the right way to be expressed, because it's always there, but it's the role that fails us. And so I see that with my parents and my communication with them. As I've let go more and more of that belief in the role that they're playing, we've had way more genuine connections and actually been able to learn from each other a lot more, as opposed to me just like looking up to them as this all-knowing being, sort of like the way we look up to Sky Daddy and things like that.
I just want to say, as a parent, Andrew, that that's really encouraging. I just wanted to say that because, of course, we're all doing the best we can, kind of hoping for that result, that by the time they get out into the world and they're out there facing the shit, that they go, oh, right, you're not this person that I've kind of conceptualized. Because I've had moments like that with my daughter where you could see that gap suddenly disintegrate. Right? You're not dad. You're just you. Dad's an idea. And so, yeah, you really hope that that's going to happen, that as they get older, that relationship's going to grow. And so I just wanted to say that, both great job to your parents, but also, that's really encouraging. I'm really glad that you shared that. I know everybody who's a parent here is probably feeling pretty good about that as a whole. We do have to wrap up because we are coming to the 1.5 hour point, but normally what I would do is I would ask our guest to share a tip or something along those lines to help people stay in the present, stay out of their self-concept, things like that. I'm not going to do that today. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pass it over to Dooz first, and I'm going to ask, what do you have to share with us as a result of the conversation that just happened? Which part of the algorithm are you representing today?
Yeah, I guess in general, the key takeaway is don't take life any more seriously than you need to, or that you choose to, I should say. It's a better way to put it. Because yeah, being a parent, you get it, going back to that for a minute, what tends to happen is you need to have a certain role in sometimes when there's safety involved, when there's lessons to be learned that I'll flat out tell my kids sometimes, I'll snap at them sometimes about something that, run, I'm making this up, but like if they're getting ready to run in the road, you snap at them and you tell them to stop and get in the car. We got to go, blah, 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 blah. And it's not till later that I sit down and almost like break the fourth wall with them. Like, look, this is why I did what I did, because I didn't have time at the moment to break this down to you, but let's have a 30-minute conversation on why you shouldn't do that. And it's like, you almost have to recognize that I had to put on the dad hat for a split second because you're about to run into traffic. Now I'm putting on my human hat, my friend hat. Let's talk about it and let's learn from it. And it's kind of like this, you have to be careful not to fall into this pitfall of thinking just because, nothing matters. If you take the nihilistic standpoint that, just let whatever happen, let it be, laissez-faire, like just let things happen. It's like, you don't have to though. Like you can choose to kind of go in and out of it, to kind of guide which way you're going to go based on, again, what you've learned in the past. If something makes you feel uncomfortable and you feel like you need to say something in a moment, just say it. Don't feel like, oh, I'm enlightened, so I can't say that because that's going to make me look snippy and, kind of an asshole. Like, if it needs to be said, then just say it. And if somebody thinks that way, then who cares? Like, ultimately, it doesn't matter. But if, don't let that's almost a limiting belief within a limiting belief, and so like there's so many layers again and so much nuance between the lines, and you just gotta just make it up as you go along, and eventually you'll get to a point where you'll realize you don't have all the answers. You'll never have all the answers. You could live to be 112 years old. You won't have all the answers, but you can live in a place where that's okay and be comfortable with that and just ride the wave, let chaos ensue and just learn to surf, And so there's a lot within that and just different lessons. And, all I know right now is being a father and being the person that I am right now. And I'm sure there's all these different things that whatever I said in this entire 1.5 hours could be completely false for other people. And I recognize that. And so don't listen to me, like just figure it out for yourself. It's like, it's almost kind of a cop out in a way, but it's like, I don't have the answers. I don't know why you expect me to have the answers. If somebody tells you they do, they're lying too. Like, you have to figure it out for yourself, because there is no ultimate truth. Just be, and, you know, do what you can with it. And in general, just try to have fun, because, you know, if you have the choice of, you know, enjoying yourself or being miserable, I would choose to enjoy myself, you know, if the choice is to be had. And so that's directionally, if that's the vector that I'm pointing myself towards, it's in general trying to have fun more so than trying to be miserable. But again, I say that from also an entitled position, and knowing this and having, you know, all the things that culminated into the place that I'm at right now. And so there again, I'm full of shit. So just, I don't know what to tell you. Like, you know, I'm just a guide. You know, I can tell you exactly what I have done and the consequences of which, and how I would act in certain situations, but about it, you know, just what you can.
Perfect. Absolutely. If this was volleyball, I'd say that's an excellent bump. Now, Otto, you set up the spike for Andrew, and we will wrap up this episode.
Yeah. So for me, when Andrew was talking a few minutes ago, the kind of idea that popped into my mind was like, we're looking for conceptless connection. Like, many of our connections are concept based, like we're connecting through concepts. My idea of you can connect with your idea of me, or our ideas. We're both this or that. We're both Buddhists. We're both this. That's why we connect. And there's all this subtext as to that we can connect because our ideas are the same. And for me, it's like, I love when we can get to conceptless connection. I love when it doesn't matter what my name is. It doesn't matter who you are. I don't care where you are. We're particles flying through the universe, and it just doesn't really matter. And it doesn't not matter. It's all beautiful parts of our lives, but they're not absolute. And it ties into that statement of like, words make wonderful servants and terrible masters. And I feel like that's, in a way, a lot of what these conversations are. It's just how to get out of the concept, how to honor it and play with it and dance with it and juggle it, but not be so clinging to it that, like, for dear life, because it's like that. It's like the image of the monkey trap, where it's like they reach in and they grab a banana and then they never let go of the banana and they're stuck there. And I'm like swinging from the trees going, come on, there's bananas up here, you guys, let go, just let go. We can play, we can have fun, come on. And so that's part of the sacred clown aspect of me. It's like, you know, just like dancing, eating 5 bananas while you're sitting there holding on to your banana in the trap. And come on, let's dance, you guys. I don't care if you're Andrew, not Andrew, Andrew and not Andrew. Let's just play. I don't care. Let's go.
Absolutely. No, that's a fantastic way of putting it, man. And I resonate with that a lot. And the connection, because I recognize that I'm you, is what it really comes down to. And that's how I felt on this call. I really feel like I'm just talking to myself, and I appreciate the way you put that, because that's how I see both of you. Like, you guys inform me a lot with your content and the way you go about your lives and the things that you do. Like, it's really cool to see, and you bring me back to center in a lot of ways, because, you know, I'm getting better about not getting so caught up in all the shit out there, holding on so tightly to that fucking banana through the fence. But, you know, I'm learning as I go, and you two are both massive parts of that. And so I appreciate you very much. And I'm so happy that we got to have this conversation finally, because I've been looking forward to it a ton. And I genuinely appreciate both of you so much. So thank you for taking the time out of your day to chat and connect with us.
And to our dear listener, thank you again for joining us for Roundtable number 9. We look forward to seeing you in future episodes. Do remember that Dualistic Unity now has a movie review series. The first episode was released today, and it's all about the movie What About Bob, starring Bill Murray and Richard Dreyfuss. Fantastic movie, all about connection and getting past the concept of yourself. So do check that out. Thank you so much for joining us. Please take care.
Bye, everyone.